today on the pod, we have Maria from Unshackled Ventures, a firm dedicated to immigrant founders. Thank you for coming on the show today, Maria. I really appreciate it.
Pumped to be here.
Okay, so first question we have for you today, can you talk about your path getting into VC and did your experience in politics with immigration and criminal justice reform have any impacts on it?
Yeah, it was a very quirky path for sure, but I think most of us end up in VC. Close to college time, kind of have something like that. So, combination of a lot of luck and a lot of hustling, I would say. But it started, I grew up in my family is an immigrant family. I was born in Colombia. We moved to the States when I was 7 years old. Moved to Orlando, Florida, which is this fun suburban place to grow up in the South. Not sure I would recommend it to everyone, but it's definitely a way to grow up. And yeah, I wanted to get kind of far away from everything Florida and South when it was time to go to college. So I, ventured out to California, attended UC Berkeley, and go Bears. And so I think I actually most of my life experience had to do so much with immigration. Seeing my parents deal with everything from when we came to this country in '99 all the way to I didn't become a citizen until my senior year of high school when I was graduating. So that was 2011. So that took quite a couple of years, and seeing the ups and downs of seeing my own family figure out everything that it took to do that was not easy. And so I went to, also growing up in Florida, I think one of the first memories I have of politics was Bush versus Gore, where it came down to Florida. I remember my family kind of stayed up all night trying to figure out what was going on. It was our first US election. It was supposed to be the epitome of democracy, quick and easy, and it was absolutely not that. So I think I was just exposed to understanding, politics and how that impacts everyday folks. And so went to Berkeley, and I was super passionate about I'm gonna be pre-law, I'm gonna go to law school, I'm gonna do all these crazy things, I'm gonna change the law, I'm gonna make it easier for everyone. I wanted, quick, rapid change, young and idealist. Did a couple internships in law and just Congress, stuff like that, and quickly realized that it's not at all what I thought it was. It's very slow process, kind of the anti of tech, of move fast. It's the opposite of that, and for good reason. Don't get me wrong, I think there's a right place for institutions, but quickly realized that was probably not going to be my path, that the day-to-day of my job needed to feel a lot more kind of active, upbeat. I'm pretty high energy. I wanted to feel like I could make change on the day-to-day, or at least monthly, which was now promised in any campaign or political office or policy office. So started shifting just to tech and exploring kind of where's the intersection of maybe what I knew at the time, which was a lot of policy and immigration, just political science and tech. And so at the time there was this new group called Forward.us, which is getting started by Zuckerberg and a couple of tech CEOs and VCs around immigration reform. It was before he started Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, so it was still his early days of doing anything outside of Facebook. And he had trusted his roommate from Harvard, Joe Green, to kind of run this group, and he had trusted this guy named Manny as his chief of staff, and Manny was the one that hired me and brought me in. And we basically spent my entire senior year of college at Berkeley, where my grades were probably nowhere close to what they should have been for actual law school, but I had already given up, so I didn't care. And I was pretty much working part-time with Forward.us, and my job was to work on all special projects. We did a ton of fundraising from a bunch of these tech CEOs and VCs that we see on Twitter around immigration lobbying reform. And after a year with them, it became clear that Zuckerberg had kind of bigger plans for the organization to be part of ZZI, or we weren't going to need to be fundraising for it anymore. Manny got pulled in by the Hillary campaign to be finance director for California. I did not want to go into politics. I helped him kind of set up a couple of the first fundraisers and get everything in order, but I was, kind of found myself again getting wrapped into that world, and I was like, I obviously I see the importance of this, but I did not, immigrant family. If I told my parents I was going to make like, $5 an hour in campaign, they would have slapped me after Berkeley. I had student debt. So I was like, guys, I was like, Manny, recommend me places that I should go work that you think I'd be good at. He was like, you've met a ton of VCs. I think you would actually be really great. You have a capacity to identify talent really early, and you just have a hustle. So he was like, there's this fund getting started. These two guys that want to start a fund just for immigrant founders. I feel like you would align really well with them. And so he introduced us. We had a ton of different conversations. I was going to be their first hire on like everything community and investment side, and I kind of just pitched myself, and they really took a bet on me that I'm still very grateful for. But that's kind of the long path. Sorry that was long, but it was
No,
a
that was
weird
perfect.
long way.
I really think this is really poignant right now because with the election coming up and seeing a lot of like Gen Z activation campaigns to go out and vote. Like I saw like Up to Us, 99 Problems. Do you think it's really important to get people out to vote, and how do you go about organizing people in that type of way? And how does that work and go into venture then?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's incredibly important. I mean, it's something that is still very near and dear to my heart, and I continue to be involved. I was supportive of the P campaign and the primaries, and I worked with their tech team and helped with fundraising. Did a really cool event with community organizers in Oakland. And I think the time that I got wrapped into the most, which is probably closer to what I see what's going on with Gen Z, was I was working full time already. It was probably a year or so, maybe even less, working at Unshackled, when the election happened and we lost. So that was brutal. And I remember feeling awful and trying to figure out what we could do. And unfortunately, as I looked through all these different initiatives that were going on, I mean, there was so much stuff. The Women's March was being organized. I found this incredible group of individuals that kind of took me on in the early days before launching, and they had been iterating on some ideas of what they were going to do, and brought me into the group. It was like 8 of us. None of them had political experience. One was like a GMAT tutor up in the Northeast. One was kind of this freelance designer in Oakland, and we started what is now called Swing Left. It started right at the 2016 inauguration, and what we wanted to do was, all of us obviously lived in very blue districts, and where we saw the highest impact was, we're going to keep losing if the Democrats are all sitting in New York, San Francisco, Atlanta, and we can't get them to go vote elsewhere, and obviously we can't convince people to move. So the next thing was like, how do we use that concentrated energy and money from very blue districts to their nearest swing district? And so we called it Swing Left, and it was a very simple tool of plug in your zip code, and it would tell you what was your nearest swing district. And basically you would sign up for your swing district. And at the time we were just trying to get like a list going. But when we launched it during the Women's March, it blew up. I mean, we had like 400,000 signups in a week. It went pretty national, and a lot of celebrities were retweeting it, and so we were getting calls from the DNC, we were getting calls from the DCCC, we were lawyers being like, you guys are sitting on this like super valuable list. We ran it on a type form, so that's how much we put ahead of it. But I think that the gist of it was we try to focus on one thing that mattered, and that's where we built that whole organization around. And the one thing that mattered to us was we need the data point of what people in what concentrated blue districts want to volunteer or donate to a certain district. And just by having that list, we had pretty good data that allowed us to mobilize. And Swing Left did a huge amount of work for what eventually became, we did swing the House. It was focused on winning the U.S. House of Representatives, and obviously we did get that back in the last midterm, so hopefully we accomplished that. But it's super important. But I think the core thing is there's a lot of things to do, and everyone has to kind of play their own role in figuring out what is one thing that matters the most. And people fall across the lines, right? Some folks know the Senate is going to matter a ton, as we've seen with the Supreme Court. We cannot not have a Senate. some folks really think that local elections is really what moves the needle. And so every individual can come to that conclusion of what is one thing that matters the most systematically in making that chain work, and pick that and focus on that. Because I think, Gen Z is great at building a lot of tools and mobilizing. And so the question is, where do you want to put all that energy to, and how do we make it work together?
Well, you have
Thank you for that. That's a really great explanation.
Yeah. And you have like a lot going on. It's like really cool things that you're working on. And I know you talked a little bit about your first experience in tech earlier. Now you work at Unshackled Ventures, where you help invest in immigrant founders. Can you talk about the importance of having a fund that focuses on expanding access to immigrant founders?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is something we're super excited about, because obviously we know all the issues that come with venture, right? The lack of access, the investing in the same type of founders all the time, and funds competing for the same type of deals. We view it as a combination of things, right? So we know the data that immigrants as a whole, first and second generation, meaning like, you immigrated to this country, or you are the kid of an immigrant parent, uh, over index on new business creation, not just in tech, but also small business, right? Your mom and pop shop and your corner store. Immigrants, are 46% of Fortune 500 companies that got started, 51% of unicorn startups. So they clearly over index proportionally to what percentage of the population are in the United States. And so our fund kind of made sense in that, let's double on this population and focus on it and really help them succeed. And so figuring out what does the immigrant population need to succeed faster is kind of our question that we ask ourselves every single day. And obviously access to capital, right? If you didn't grow up in the US, you don't have that usual family and friends round most of the time, or that's one thing. So access to capital or venture funds, so that helps. Access to a network, so mentors, advisors, other entrepreneurs that can help you in that journey. Peer group is super important, because you're not going to have it from your own family, right? If you don't come from a place where tech entrepreneurship is kind of a given, you need that to understand how to play the game, really. And the last one is more on, what are the barriers immigration wise? So like I mentioned, with my family going through like a 10-year process of immigration, when you're working on a company, time matters. And something that really sinks a lot of time is immigration, working with immigration lawyers, figuring out, well, all the different visas and how to work on your company full time, if at all, if possible. And so we wanted to remove that barrier. So we do have an in-house immigration counsel that deals with all immigration related problems. And I think for us, the opportunity as a fund is also, when we talk with our LPs, we are very excited because we are growing the pool of entrepreneurs, right? We're not fighting for the same deals that everyone is fighting for, not because we don't think they're great, but because we think that there's so much opportunity to grow the pool of entrepreneurs and have new deals. So we think that by our existence, the entire ecosystem truly benefits from having just a new pool of immigrants to tap into. And we've proven with decent success. Obviously, we've only been around for 5 years or so, that our companies are doing really great at the seed, Series A onward.
Yeah, you highlighted a really important fact about that friends and family round, and typically these immigrant founders don't have access to that. How important is that first check for businesses right now?
I think it's always, for us, it's we see the importance of having your own money or family and friends to kind of do some of the early testing and validation of company building, right? So customer discovery, building an MVP, even just taking time off of work, right, to test something out for 3 months. It truly is a privilege to not have a job or income for 3 months or 6 months or a year. And so that, I think that the importance of that money is just having the freedom to focus on product and company building. And so, without family or friends around or a network of angels to support you, you do rely on the smaller round, which is what we call the pre-seed round. And so that's what we focus on, right? We are a pre-seed fund because we think that's where we can make the most impact. Not at Series A, not at Series B, it's really at pre-seed. That first round, we want to be that day zero investor.
Um, Yes, I have one question about that. So in terms of, well, yeah, I guess like, so what have been some cool solutions that you have been able to help invest in at Unshackled Ventures?
Like in terms of companies we've invested in,
Yes, yes.
we're pretty sector agnostic. So, you know, our average check size is like 300K, sometimes 350. So we try to be that first round. We are very ownership focused. So, you know, we try to get anywhere between 8 to 12% of ownership in these companies. But we are generalists. You know, we know that our founders already have some key insights and build in all kinds of things. So, you know, we've invested in women's health, we've invested in AI and media, blockchain, travel, the future of work. We have a couple of future of work investments, audio investments. Now that we know audio is great, e-commerce, like a ton of combination of enterprise and consumer. And we're really excited about everything our portfolio companies are investing in.
Yeah, I interacted with one of your portfolio founders the other day, Midas Client. He's working on Rodeo. That was super cool. Really nice
Yes.
app. It's in the audio space too. Like, what have
Yeah.
you been forming a thesis around that in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's so much going on in audio right now, so it's tough to read through the noise. But I think we're seeing that there is definitely demand for some audio social network, broader speaking of all topics of all usages, and there's also demand and space for verticalized audio. So you think just mental space and owning mental space audio, entertainment, different, more specific to what the entire vertical looks like. And so figuring out, you know, who the big social player will be is one, and I think there's some early signs of who it could be. And then there is a lot of more specific ones that are focused on, you know, coaching, on entertaining, on listening to music with friends. There's a lot of bets going on right now, and I think it's really going to come down to execution of product insights, and most importantly, thoughtfulness in how to build community. I think that there's an approach where it's too much too fast and not focused enough, and there's an approach where you're too niche. And so figuring out that balance is going to be a really tough one on the audio side, but there's a lot of really awesome people working on it. So hopefully we can see something great.
Yeah, for sure. I think my next question I have for you is that in your current portfolio founders, how has COVID-19 affected them too?
You know, I think at the beginning, obviously, enterprise got impacted more so than consumer. You know, people were home. Consumer tools were actually doing better than pre-COVID times because people were home on their phones most of the time. Enterprise was tough, right? Obviously, because you know, you're selling into customers that were thinking about layoffs, that were thinking about losing revenue. And so it took some adjusting to time, and I think some of our companies felt that kind of pause in customer conversations, but most of that is back on. I think we haven't really seen a huge loss or impact on our portfolio companies that was permanent. I think it was more of a pause for kind of that March, April limbo time where everyone was confused on what is going on and what does this mean for business.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I guess like one thing that you are a part of Latinx VC. So can you talk about the work that you do with that organization and how impactful the organization has been so far?
Yeah, we started Latinx VC like 6 months or so after Black VC started, and it was driven through kind of the same observations that we as a community had as well, right? Which was we need to work together to make sure of there was two things we really cared about. We need to get more folks into venture that are from our community. We need to retain more folks that are already in venture and make sure they don't go anywhere, that we support them professionally and network and source wise and deals wise, whatever we need to do to make sure they don't go anywhere. And the last one was on how do we support our emerging managers, so those that are just starting funds that are from our community, and how do we connect into LPs? What do we need to provide frameworks for in terms of to think about what it takes to build a fund? And so those are kind of the three things we're mostly focused on. Where, we hope to obviously expand beyond that to help entrepreneurs at some point as well. But it takes some time to get the org in order. So we're using like the same lawyers as Black VC when it comes to incorporating as a nonprofit, all that stuff. But we're really, really excited to just kind of be a go-to resource for any folks that enter venture that are Latinx and help out. We actually have a monthly call that is Black VC, Latinx VC, and all race, and the leaders of each organization. We sync up on efforts. We kind of come to like agreement on which of all of our opportunities are open to all three groups and which ones we want to continue to just focus on our individual community, because that's important as well. So we kind of discuss that. And so you'll see that a lot of our material is open to all three groups, and Alraise is doing an incredible job with Pam at the head of it and being inclusive of the organizations and making sure that that kind of always provides a flow for all of us to come together and figure out how to provide resources that we answer all the same questions, right? Like all of us spend time answering the question, how do I get into VC? So we're like, okay, how do we all come together to answer those questions? And then kind of defer in the areas that we know is different for our individual communities. But we're really excited about what the three organizations can do together.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And I guess, so for you, your role as a VC with helping immigrant founders, and then also, being a part of Latinx VC, like, do you have any advice for minority founders looking to raise capital? Like, what are some things that they can do to overcome like the common challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot comes, there's two things, all with the same thing, which is doing your homework. Do your homework on who you should even be talking to, right? Time is super important. So, are you going to be talking to angels, pre-seed, seed? Like, where are you realistically as a company? Don't waste time talking to any investor just because they're an investor. If not, you're going to get, what's called shopped around, which is everyone has talked to, no one has invested, and everyone's wondering why not. And sometimes it's not because there's any other reason, but because the founder just talked to people that were just not relevant. The second thing is do your homework, obviously, in your own company. I think what is most important is really read through. There's so much material online, YC Startup School. Most of the top funds have, a lot of podcasts now on company building. First Round Capital's review is incredible. Really do the homework on what makes a company different, right? How to define your secret sauce and your unique insight on what you're building, answering the why now. And those are two very different things. The biggest mistake I see founders make is answering the what's your unique insight with the response that they should have for their why now, right? So unique insight of a remote company, and then they say, well, COVID and the world's moving remote and all that stuff. So we know that there's an incredible opportunity and we're the ones to tackle it. That's a why not response. It's not a unique insight response. And so stuff like that is homework for founders to do.
That's really
for that
helpful. Thank you.
For that example, can you give us like what a unique insight could be?
Sure. I mean, unique insight usually comes from like countless of hours working on your customer discovery, right? And what's exciting about this is you can really come to a unique insight from your own experience in the depths of having, worked in a tech company or feeling that pain point on the consumer end, whatever it is. But it really comes down to understanding what that customer journey is. And so assuming that there's some pain point, right? So I don't know, you could use like Slack. Email is broken is okay. It's probably more of an observation than an insight, and saying, we're moving to a more collaborative world is also a why now, not an insight. But understanding what is, the customer journey of what are people using when email is not the go-to, right? It probably came from a lot of observations of monitoring what people do, right? They're probably texting, WhatsApping, Telegramming, like using chat stuff, and then seeing, okay, but what's wrong with that, right? They're currently, people are smart and they hack away at a problem through a solution, even whatever it exists. And so what are they currently using? And don't say our customers currently don't have a solution for this problem, because that's not true. People are smart enough, they've figured out a way to hack around this. So In the case of Slack, it was probably that they were texting or they were doing short emails, they were jumping on calls. And so, Slack really figured a way to measure how much time was being spent and just lack of communication that was organized, and the cost to collaboration and understanding what it meant to design the right product. Like what did it mean? Why channels was a thing, right? Like why channels, why public, why private? Why was it important to be able to share files on there and pin things? Everything had a reason for what was the best way to create this product and reinvent the way that we collaborate and communicate. That was like that perfect medium between a text and an email. But that's kind of in the nitty gritty of sitting down with customers, 500 customers, and being like, I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to observe you do what you do and solve the problem that I claim to be solving in your own manner. And it's not telling them, would you use this? It's like, I want to see what you do and figure out on my own if there's something that I will offer you that is like 10 times better, truly. And so that's kind of where the unique insights and nuggets are, really, that you find in tech. And so I think if founders spend most of their time before coding, before even spending any time prototyping, that you can answer that question of really what is your secret sauce going to be, is probably, it's not time free, but it definitely is money free. You don't gotta hire an engineer to do that.
That's so true. Going back on the other side of it, talking about what makes it be a great VC, this is like the last few questions we have for you. But like personal branding is really critical. You have a newsletter, you have a really nice website, you're really active on Twitter. What do you think about personal branding for young VCs and people breaking in?
I mean, I think it's great. I mean, I've seen a lot of success stories of folks that are obviously smart and thoughtful, and you really use that on Twitter to show their thoughtfulness or their dissection of different issues or topics or industries. And I think that works with time, right? I think the main thing is obviously it's very time consuming. So, we have a newsletter called Grounded that it's myself, Jemima from Kaibo and Alex from First Round. We spend a lot of time together. So we were like, realistically, each of us having a newsletter is so time consuming and expect of it. We have kind of a full-time job. If you look at the folks that have, the newsletter that pumps out content twice a week, those folks are full-time in what they're doing. Whether it's Nathan and Dan or Legion, who just left in Reason, or those folks are incredible at what they do, but they also spend so much time on it. And so it's about balancing how do you spend time on the branding, but also making sure that you're making the moves that you need to make on yourself and professionally if you go on and get into venture. Right? Just having thoughts and ideas is fantastic to build that brand, but at the end of the day, you still need to build that reputation of being able to do the work. And so it's a combination of both.
Super helpful. Davey has the last question. She'll take it away.
Oh yeah. Yes. Thank you for your time. Definitely. And I guess the last question is, are there any resources that have been beneficial on your journey in venture capital or that you recommend to founders?
I mean, to founders, I definitely always recommend the First Round review as a great go-to. And then I think for the VC side, obviously the pro rata Axios is a must. Just seeing everything that's going on in the industry, seeing what companies are getting funded. I think it's both a good resource for founders and for VCs or folks that want to get into venture, because you just, once you know the 2 or 3 industries you're interested in, you're kind of expected to know every company in that space. And so that's the best way to stay up to date on who are the latest financings and who's interested in what. So that's kind of like a must. Every day reading that. Shout out to my friend Kia who does a great job at working on it with Dan. And then there's I think newsletters is actually my go-to for content material. There's a lot of incredibly smart folks doing deep dives on specific industries that it's probably kind of the best go-to.
Thank you. That was really impactful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love reading Pro Rata every morning when it hits my inbox. Super helpful to get a wide breadth of everything that's happening in the industry right now.
Yeah, and I know we went a little over time, so definitely thank you for coming onto our podcast, sharing your story and also unique insights. We definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. This was awesome.